Hi, everybody. Welcome to our next edition of Caring for Caregivers Conversations. And we're really excited today to have Shauna Sweeney from Tender join us. Hi, Shauna.
Hi, Marguerite. So glad to be here.
So, Shauna, today I know that you and I have talked before, and you have your own caregiving story. And we're also going to talk about technology and how it can help and benefit and some of the challenges with making sure that we're utilizing technology appropriate during caregiving. So, Shauna, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about your own caregiving journey and what led you to be interested in caregiving in tech?
I'd be delighted to. I'm so glad to be here and sharing my story. I began this journey into being a family caregiver 9 years ago, which is hard to believe. I was working in tech at the time, and I suddenly got the call that all of us dread, which was that my dad, who raised me as a single parent, had been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. Now, at the time, I did not know much about Alzheimer's. I definitely didn't know what the term caregiver meant or that I had suddenly become one. All I knew was that I was going to be there for my dad, and this was my opportunity to really repay the favor and be there for him in the way that he had been there for me growing up. So began my journey. I dove right into trying to figure this out. At the time, I thought this just meant helping him go to his doctor's visits. And I realized very, very quickly that there was so much more to family caregiving than what I had originally anticipated. So I quickly looked around, and because I've come to rely on so many apps and services to run my own life, went to go search for something to do the same for my dad. Very quickly realized that there wasn't anything. And so I started to hack all different types of systems together. I put up a shared email account. I started to collect all my dad's usernames and passwords and try and wrap my arms around what it really meant to start to take care of a whole other adult's life. Very quickly realized that this was not going to suffice, and that at some point, someone was going to need to step up and really make this easier for the millions of people like me who are doing all of this work. And so about a year and a half ago, I used my maternity leave. I've got a small daughter named Nemi, and I used her nap time to go ahead and prototype the very beginning idea of Tender. And Tender is really what I wish had been available to me when I had first started this journey with my dad. It is the one single place where you can do all of the most important work in managing the day-to-day of another person's life while also tackling the really big challenges that we often encounter with family caregiving along the way. I'm very excited. We've been building ever since, and we are building with the very latest technology with generative AI, which I know we're going to talk about in a little bit, but it really opens the door to all new ways that we can support people as they're doing this work and make this easier for families to spend more time on the things that matter, which is the quality time together with each other, rather than a lot of the paperwork filling and chasing and hunting down of the right information.
You mentioned that it was important to work with your father and have the information you need. What were some of the kinds of information that you needed in order to help your father or to support your father as he's going along this path?
Yeah, I'd like to say that I knew all of it right away, and I had this very clear sense of what information I needed, but I really started to piece this together. First, it was, what are the credit cards we needed to pay that month? What were the bank accounts that I needed to make sure I had access to? The insurance policies, the re-enrollment, the passwords and usernames to all of his accounts that I knew I was going to have a limited amount of time to work with him to be able to get access to and make sure that there were no balls dropped. This started to build over time. We started to add in social security number, birth certificate, legal documents we didn't yet have, like a living will or a power of attorney. So this has really been sort of a rich body of information that I began in earnest to build with him 9 years ago and then have continued to build ever since.
And I think for folks who are just getting to meet you, if I remember, you're on the East Coast, right? And your father's in California?
I am 3,500 miles away, which really put a forcing function on my ability to rely on technology to help do a lot of this work.
You know, even as you were talking about those lists, I mean, the things that, I never actually thought about getting copies of birth certificates for my parents at all, or like where those might even exist. It's That's a new piece of information I hadn't thought about already. So was it hard to get your father to sort of accept your help? And did he understand what you were trying to do by gathering that information?
You know, in the beginning, it was tough. We were dealing with a really big blow to the family. This was way earlier than we had ever anticipated. My dad was really in his late 50s at this point, and so it was big. I don't think this was something that could have been done overnight. What we started to build up was a bit of a tradition where we would sit down, we would go out to lunch, have a really nice experience together, and then do a little bit at a time. I couldn't tell you that it was a linear line. Sometimes it was easier than others to have these conversations and think about what would we need to do in the event of, for instance, with an advanced health directive, and what were his wishes. These are really hard conversations to have. So we really tried to make them bite-sized and over time. And so that was the most effective way for our family, and based off of a lot of the conversations I've had with other caregivers and online communities, which are incredibly important. I would recommend anyone who's going through this, make sure you have your people to rely on and support. You're not in this alone. But I was hearing a lot of this advice from others too, who had come before me and had similar conversations.
So thinking a little bit about technology, so there are a couple different ways I think that you've already mentioned in terms of how technology can help in the caregiving journey, right? About like tracking records, accessing accounts, and also support groups. These
Absolutely.
are all ones. It sounds like. Are there other forms of technology that you think are helping you along this caregiving journey? And what's been most valuable to you so far for you as you and your family have been on this journey?
I mean, technology is a tool. I have been excited about technology and the promise of technology and helping us solve our problems and really meet us where we are since I've started my career. It's why I got into technology in the first place. I think there's many different ways that I have found personally technology has helped me with my own family, but so many new ways that we are building towards right now that open up new doors for us to be able to use in new ways. Generative technology is just transforming the way we think about caregiving in general for families. And I think one of the things that was most effective for me in the beginning was starting to get everything into one place, really using really basic technology like Google Documents with my family to be able to share information, gather information that I might not have, to be able to use ride sharing when I might not be able to step away from work and my dad really missed some of his friends and wanted a social visit, being able to see where he was with Find My Friends. This is incredibly important when you're working with someone with Alzheimer's who might get lost every once in a while and might need a little bit of help in finding their way home, which often happened with my dad for a few years there. This was just a go-to for our family, incredibly important. Also, really basic things like auto tracking of like auto pay for bills on credit cards, digital statements. This is a way, especially when you're a remote caregiver, you can stay on lockstep with your loved one and make sure that nothing is falling through the cracks. Really important, and much more important to be able to do that, especially if you're not in the same house where you can check the mail. I think right now, with what we're seeing with generative AI, there are incredible opportunities to fill out a number of the different forms. As families, we're being asked to fill out over and over again, often the same form in places like the emergency room. Much easier to do this through generative AI. You're also seeing the opportunity to take a lot of the cognitive burden that a lot of our those like me who are often carrying around massive amounts of information on another person, whether it's passwords or usernames or social security numbers, really key sensitive information, and store that in a place with very fast recall. This is just going to change the entire landscape of what it's like for all of us to be able to do this work without a lot of the anxiety we feel about, do we have the right information when we need it? And we don't know when we're going to need it. And knowing that we can't be in 5 different places at once, how can we start to really optimize where we are and lean on technology in ways that we haven't been able to previously, like virtual physician visits or online notarization? We can do that just from our desk at work versus having to take a day off.
Okay, so wow, that's like a huge rush of information.
I've been thinking about this a lot.
So one of the things that I think we should take a quick pause and say, which is, can you actually tell folks what generative AI means? Because I think we've got a lot of viewers who are wondering, what generative AI is.
Absolutely. Some of you might have been hearing a lot of headlines recently about something called ChatGPT. What you might not know is what GPT stands for, which is Generative Pre-Training Transformer Model. That's a mouthful.
Oh my goodness.
I know. I know it's wild, but it is unlocking our ability to take contextual information. This is information like your birthday or your primary care physician's number or your specialist number or the medications and prescriptions that you currently have. And it's able to then develop a very smart system for tracking all of this on our behalf, almost instantaneous. It's incredibly powerful stuff. There's all kinds of other use cases for it that everyone right now is really building around. One of them being multilingual, abilities for translation. As you can imagine, this is incredibly important, especially when we're talking about a house where you might have an older generation that's speaking a different language. This was the case in my own family. My great-grandma spoke Cantonese, and myself speaking English. All of this is now being basically made much easier through generative AI. And it's really the horsepower around which a lot of companies like mine are starting to build technology solutions.
There's so much there to unpack. Maybe we start with for the end user, meaning, or the person who is getting that support. What tips or what guidance can you give us for folks to feel like they can trust and that they can become more comfortable with the use of these technologies or these platforms in caregiving and just frankly in our daily lives?
It's a great question. It's something that my team has been thinking about for, I think the better part of the last 7 months. How do you use this technology in a way that's safe? It protects our data. It's used for the best of what it can do, and while also already anticipating and mitigating it so that it really is only used for the things that we want it to be used for. We actually brought on a professor from Princeton. He leads ethics and AI in order for us to be able to develop an ethics of care of how do we use generative AI in order to do a lot of this work. So important to be starting to think about responsible innovation with this new technology from the get-go. I think in terms of how a user can get comfortable with this technology, I would recommend just trying it out. Go to ChatGPT and start to play. It's amazing what this interface can do. I have actually used this myself in the very beginning for my own caregiving questions. I went to ChatGPT and just started to have a conversation with it. And it pulls from the entire internet in terms of the responses and the recommendations. It's incredibly powerful. I think I was on for that first session for maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I think the most amazing piece of it is that unlike a lot of the sort of platforms we've used in the past, like Google, for instance, where you kind of have to have an idea of what you want when you go to Google and you type something in. With something like ChatGPT or generative AI in general, it's conversational. It can go both ways. And you might have started thinking you had a question, for instance, about what the benefits of a certain vitamin might be. And you might end up in a totally different place based off of that conversation, which is actually, what other health benefits could you be thinking about? How should you be creating a care system for creating more nutritional value in your loved one's life? This will take you through all different directions, and it's amazing to watch it in action. And so I would advise anyone who's only been hearing about this in the news, actually try it for yourself, and you'll be surprised how effective it really is in starting to give you ideas that you didn't even know that you had started the session with thinking that you needed.
So for our viewers, just wanting to maybe help clarify. So regardless of what sort of search engine you use, right, whether it's Bing or it's Google or any number of them, there are these websites that you can go to, like ChatGPT, and you can type in a question. Like, say, a good question might be, how do you prevent falls? What's the best way to keep my house safe for older adults? That's one way of using that generative AI as you're talking about to get ideas.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really culls from the entire internet. And so you get these amazing, incredibly fast summaries of everything that might have taken you multiple searches to get through, and then just a tremendous amount of work on your part to get to the answer you're looking for. It's very conversational, just like the conversation we're having right now.
My goodness. I've played around a little bit with it, but not in that sense of having a conversation back and forth.
Yeah. And you can imagine, this is what gets us so excited. You can take all of the wisdom from all of the millions of caregivers, so like myself, who are out there, the tips, the wisdom, the recommendations, the incredible expertise at places like AARP, and you can now have a conversational type of an engagement where you're back and forth asking questions and getting answers that are the best of all of those pulled together on your behalf. So just tremendous power in being able to get you the right answer quickly.
So for older adults in particular who are very cautious with sharing their information and not wanting, here at AARP, we work a lot on fraud and scams. And it's one of the things that we try to educate folks. And we have, in fact, a series called Fraud Watch Fridays, where people are asking questions and they can join and ask individual questions about an experience that's happened to them. Do you have some guidance on what to share and what not to share?
Yeah, it's, fraud is so important to be on the watch for, and it's important. It's wonderful that you are hosting, I think, a regular series on this. It's something that I've encountered with my own father as we got into mid-stage Alzheimer's with a number of different services that he signed up for that he didn't intend to. So very real and something to watch out for. I think when thinking about technology, and we think about this and we take it very seriously at Tender, it's always really important to read the terms of service, to also, if you ever have any doubts, ask a second opinion. We often find, and we've interviewed hundreds of caregivers, they're often more protective of their loved one's data than they are even of their own. And so whether it's a family member or a friend, to just get a second opinion, very important to make sure before you give any personal information that you feel like it's a trusted platform in which you are putting this data in.
So Shauna, any thoughts about what technology might be able to do around brain health?
I think there's a number of different ways that technology can be used. And so I have seen all kinds of things that have inspired me, whether it's from virtual reality and memories and being able to kind of relive certain important memories that ground a person, whether it's playing games and staying active. I know my own mother-in-law plays Sudoku all the time. These things are really important. And while they're fun, they also point the way towards meaningful different contributions technology can play. I think in terms of just general brain health awareness, one of the things I've been most inspired to see is just how much messaging is out there on social media right now around this. Hilarity for Charity, they do a great job of promoting brain health out there to their millions of followers. And so the conversation is happening in ways that I have not seen it happen on quite this level years ago. And technology is really the enabler for that.
Can you talk a little bit also about the use of technology and staying connected? Because I know it's not just, it's not just about doing the business of credit cards and payments and those kinds of things, but how does technology help us? And what have you seen over the pandemic? And now that we're sort of in a new phase of the pandemic, what are you seeing in terms of the use of technology to stay connected and for our emotional well-being?
I can tell you a few personal anecdotes, and then I can tell you a bit of what I'm seeing on a broader scale in our own community in Tender. Technology has been a lifeline for me with my dad. We live, like we talked about before, 3,500 miles apart from one another. And so FaceTime has been tremendously important for us to stay connected and for me to be able to stay present in his life. This would not have been possible before. And so it's wonderful to suddenly have that sense of presence and be in the same room together. I believe firmly that technology should be a connector between people, not a replacement. And so where I think I see technology with the most promise is where it convenes and gathers like-minded people together, especially with something like caregiving. I can tell you from firsthand experience, it can feel incredibly isolating. The problems we all face can feel very personal, and it's amazing what it feels like when you're suddenly a part of a much larger community, many of whom might have gone through similar experiences to you. I can say firsthand what that has been like. I built a community in the last company that I worked with that got to about 3,000 caregivers. And just the idea that I had somewhere to go with real people, some of whom I've never met before in real life, that I could connect with, I could share incredibly personal experiences with, ask advice. The collective wisdom of all of us can be tapped through technology in ways that you just can't get to with having, everyone in one room.
So as we think about technology, maybe more broadly, what are you most like if we think, I don't know, let's say 5-10 years out, sort of what are your hopes, or what are you most excited about in terms of technology advancements?
On the grandest scheme, I really hope that it helps bring us closer together. We spend a lot of our time still stuck in administrative work, around form filling out, around repeating tasks, or waiting on hold for customer service. My hope is that technology continues to eliminate these moments so that we can spend our time being more present with one another. We have so little time with each other that I would love for technology to play a greater role in removing a lot of these barriers and making it possible for us to have a little bit more of that time to spend together.
I was on a recent vacation with my mom in Taiwan, and being able to be connected now through, different services to stay connected with family overseas is going to be really wonderful. Now we have these family chat rooms so that we can all talk to one another and know what's going on in one another's lives.
That's beautiful. Yep. I've got multiple threads with different components of both sides of my family. And it's amazing to have that level of intimacy that, you don't necessarily have to be in the same place all the time. It's great if you can be, but to be able to converse and share laughs and memories and connect with one another, there's nothing more important. So that's beautiful.
So maybe we just recap here as we sort of wind up this conversation. But for folks who are a little timid at using technology and are not necessarily so comfortable, what are the one or two things you'd say to like dip your toe in the water in terms of technology and an easy way for people to get more comfortable and to learn about what the benefits are?
Technology shouldn't be scary. It should be fun. It should be an adventure. You can take it at your own pace. I would recommend just going online and starting to search through different groups. I think there's nothing more exciting than finding your people. And so there's amazing groups out there, communities, very specific communities. You will be surprised at what you find. So whether that's through a social media site or otherwise, or I know AARP has an amazing caregiver group. These are great places to dip your toe in. And you know what? If it's too soon for you to participate, just check it out and see what's going on. And, when you feel ready, you can join the conversation.
Well, I really appreciate your time you taking time out today to join us for this conversation. Really excited to see what you're doing around supporting caregivers through technology. I hope that the journey with your father continues to go as well as can be. Glad that you're able to actually care for him being 3,500 miles away from him. I know that there's nothing like the personal touch, but I also know that we might not live in the same place where our loved ones are. So just truly appreciate that.
Thank you, Marguerite. Look, we're 9 years into this journey. Every day is a blessing. I'll take every day that I can get. And yes, there are definitely some hard days. I don't think we get through life without those, but it's a gift. And if anything, it always keeps my focus and my priorities at the right place, which is to love your family and your chosen family, and just remember that time is fleeting, so use it wisely.
Those are great words of advice. So for those of you who are looking for caregiving resources, just want to remind you that we have a website up. It's aarp.org/caregiverswa. That's for Caregivers Washington. And thanks again very much for joining us. And we look forward to our next conversations.
Thank you so much.
Take care, everybody.